Hello all, my name is Sarang and hope you're doing great. In this video, I have a special guest. Her name is Raji. So Raji is a software professional and she has worked in the IT service industries and she has worked in the technologies like .NET and in the cloud computing, and she is now focuses on the cloud security. So in this video, she's gonna give a demo on the AWS config. So let's get started and don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel. Thank you. Thank you for joining, Raji. So before we move on to the demo, could you please explain what does compliance mean in cloud security and what is the role of AWS config?
Yeah, definitely. So in the world of cybersecurity, compliance and security, they both are interconnected. So when we talk to customers and organizations, how do we create comprehensive security programs while meeting compliance rules is often something which we find. Is checking the compliance box really enough? Does it place us in a good position? What does it mean for the business? Does it mean that the business is moving forward if it is compliant? So these are the questions that shape the direction of an organization. So the difference, if you ask me, what is compliance or what is security? What's the difference between both of them? So that is something which should be understood as a fundamental requirement for any security person or any IT professional for that matter. Now, security is something which is practiced for an organization's sake. It is to make the organization resilient to the cyber threats. It is to minimize or put them in the best position to face all the modern cyber attacks, right? And it is something which is never finished. Now, no organization will say that I am secure. Nobody can attack me. So it is always an evolving process, and it is continuously maintained and it is continuously improved. Whereas compliance, it is something which is done to satisfy a regulatory body or a third party. So if you are in a healthcare, you will be storing patient records, and you will be regulated by a body called HIPAA and many other regulatory organizations. So it is driven primarily by the business that an organization does, and that is something which is done. Unlike security, compliance is you get audited by HIPAA or PCI, and you are done for a year. So in short, compliance is about meeting the standards of a third party, which they have put forward for a business. And security is about implementing the systems and the controls so that the assets which the organization has is protected from the cyber threats. So let's do a deep dive on this to understand this better. Every organization has digital assets, be it the servers, the applications. They have a number of documents which has to be stored, emails, etc. And all of these assets have to be inspected for the threats. Now, some of the examples of cyber threats: documents not being labeled, or data not being encrypted, or data loss prevention tools not being in place, or policies switched off. So these are some of the threats that we could see in an organization. Now, again, every organization comes under the purview of regulatory bodies based on the business that they do. Now, this is where compliance policies emerge. the regulatory bodies will mandate the organization to have their documents labeled, will tell them to encrypt their sensitive data. So this is where the compliance policies come into picture. And these policies or meeting compliance means meeting the standards of a third party regulatory, which are put forward as best practices, or it could even be legal requirements. Now, in order to meet these compliance policies, the organization have to implement certain systems, they have to implement security controls so that these compliance policies are met. For example, if the regulatory body says that the document should be labeled, it means that the organization should think about implementing a data classification tool. When the compliance standard says that data should be encrypted, the organization should implement an encryption management solution. So that's where the compliance and security go hand in hand. So unless and until an organization has not implemented the right security controls, it's almost impossible for them to meet compliance or to be compliant with the regulatory bodies. So today we are talking about how do we achieve compliance in AWS cloud. AWS is a cloud service provider. It's a leading cloud service provider offering a lot of services around security and compliance. Config is specifically for management and governance. So in the world of cloud, right, there is a lot of innovation that organizations do. It is the playground for accelerating innovation, which means there will be a lot of variety of resources being provisioned in the cloud platform. There will be a growth in volume, velocity, and cloud being its very nature, a lot of resources will be distributed across the globe, across several regions within the boundary the organization operates. And there will be a variety of compliance and security needs. And top of it, there is also a challenge of me having the right skill set to manage cloud resources. So how do we evaluate the resource compliance? How do we manage compliance at such a large scale? That's where config plays a major role. And this is a service from AWS which offers a continuous evaluation of the changes that these resources undergo. So it has a detailed view of the configuration of AWS resources in an account, and it will show you how resources are related to one another and how they were configured in the past, so that one can see the various configuration changes and the relationship changes it undergoes over a period of time.
That was a very good introduction about the compliance and AWS config. So could you please explain the typical use cases of AWS config?
Yeah, config is the perfect tool for cloud governance. It's used for compliance monitoring, and organizations integrate config with a lot of external tools as well. For example, ITSM tools. So when config is integrated with a CMDB, which is a configuration management database, we can automatically update the CI data in CMDB. Config again, it can be used for continuously auditing the security monitoring and analysis, because it helps to monitor the changes that AWS resources or even the external resources undergo. You will always have a continuous insight into the potential vulnerabilities that they could have. You can review your configuration history over a period of time, and it will give you a proactive insight into a potential incident. So it's a right tool for evaluating the security posture.
Okay, okay, that's great. So let's jump into the AWS config demo.
Yeah. So let's see how AWS config can be used for achieving compliance. Now I have logged in into my AWS console, and I'm going to show you how config looks in the AWS dashboard. So you can see it will be available as one of the service. So as you know that it is used to monitor the configuration of AWS services. So it gives a detailed view of the configuration of AWS resources in the account. And this includes all the resources which are even related to them. So it's not just the primary resources that an account has, even the resources to which it is tied to. For example, we will have EC2 instances, but it will also show, in addition to EC2, it will also show the security groups, the subnets, and the network interfaces. So this is how the resource inventory looks, and this is a typical dashboard that you would see. So this is a setup for which config is already enabled, and things have already been started recording. So before I move on to show you how config has to be set up, I'll take few minutes to talk on certain concepts or the terminologies that one should be familiar with. So in the context of config, when somebody says resources, so resources refer to anything that we create and manage using the AWS Management Console or the CLI or SDK or any other partner tools. The resources typically are the VPCs, the Elastic Block Store, EC2 instances, and so on. So config records these resources, and it refers to each of these resources using the unique identifier, which is ARN in the world of AWS. So you can also check the AWS documentation for all the resource types config supports. So every month there are new additions which AWS releases, and a lot of new types of resources are supported. So keep a check on the AWS news blog. Um, to keep a tab on the additional new resource types that config supports. Okay, so that's what resources mean. The other terminology which you need to be familiar is configuration history. So if you look at it, let's take any of the resource. For instance, let's take EC2 instance. And you can see here the resource inventory, the resource identifier. So this is one instance which is running in this account. And then when you click on to the resource, you will have all the metadata related to the resource, and you will be able to see something called configuration item. So the it since config records the changes made to a resource, so there is something called configuration history. So configuration history is a collection of the configuration items for a given resource. So the history it records all the changes. So you will be able to see what changes a resource underwent over a particular time. So there will be something called a resource timeline, which you can see here. So this over a period of time from a given date. So you will have start date, and you can also filter out the type of events. So you will be able to see the series of change a particular resource has undergone. So that's called as configuration history. There is another term called configuration recorder. So that is something which you can see in the settings of config. So anytime you want to start or stop config, you can put off or put on the recorder. So this is the recorder, and configuration recorder. It stores the configurations of the supported resources. So this has to be created first, and then only all the configuration recording will start. And there's another terminology called configuration snapshot. So it is a collection of the configuration items. So it gives a complete picture of the resources that are being recorded, and their configuration. So similar to the EBS snapshot, one can also take the snapshot between a given time period. So let's talk about how pricing in config works. The pricing is calculated broadly based on two different parameters. So one is the number of configuration items. So each and every change in a AWS resource is a configuration item record. So more number of changes a resource undergoes, more would be the pricing. And the other parameter it revolves around is the config rules. The more and more rules we add, whether it is managed or custom, more would be the pricing. So you can see the pricing calculator is also available. It is the AWS pricing calculator is updated with config, and the latest pricing model is available in this web page. So typically, what I have seen is for a small to medium size AWS account, typically the charges are close to 50 USD. So you go through the pricing examples given here, and you will know how the calculation is done. So first and foremost, you can have a rough idea of the number of resources that the account will accommodate over a due course of time, and the number of you would know already the number of config rules uh, that you would have, and the more evaluations it undergoes, more would be the cost. So roughly, you can assume that for a small to medium size account, you would need to allocate at least 50 USDs per month. So that's how it roughly comes to. And I personally feel it's not on the costlier side compared to other configuration management tools available in the market. So and anyway, AWS also offers a free trial. So you can try out config for a month and see how it works out. So given the benefits that it offers, it's quite a competitive pricing model. Now let's go to the main part of config where rules are added and recorded. So this is I've come to the dashboard again, so you can see the rules on the left hand side menu, and you just have to add rule, and you will be able to see the list of AWS managed rules. So these are the managed rules which are available by default. And every month, again, there are new additions which AWS does. So the 281 that you are seeing, it's not a fixed number. Every month, there are new types of rules which are added periodically. Now I'm going to show you how we can handle a scenario where we enforce enabling VPC flow logs. So every account will have a VPC, the default VPC, and also the other VPCs that we create. And as per best practice, every VPC should have a flow log enabled so that we know what is the inflow and the outflow traffic. Now there are teams which may not follow the best practice, so there is a tendency of getting deviated, and it would be good to have a rule which constantly evaluates whether all the VPCs have their associated flow logs or not. So let's make advantage of the managed rule that AWS offers. So this is the default rule that we get. It's VPC Flow logs enabled. So as you can see in the description, it checks whether a VPC has the flow log enabled. So you just need to click add, and then you can choose the frequency in which the rule has to be evaluated. So whether the rule should be evaluated every 6 hours, 24 hours. So I think 24 hours is a good time. If you feel that the frequency of people creating VPCs is more, you can choose the frequency accordingly. And there are certain rule parameters available as well. So, for example, if you want to restrict or if you want to attach or tag value to the rule, you can do that. So you click next here, and you add the rule. So now that the rule is added, every time, so what it basically means is if anybody creates a VPC and if the flow log is left and they have not enabled it, this will show as non-compliant under the compliance field. So let me go to the VPC dashboard and try to see if I could play around with the compliance status. So I have one VPC in this region, and the flow log is already available. Let me go and delete the flow log. So the flow log is deleted. So even though I have selected the frequency as 24 hours, every rule can be evaluated at any given point in time manually. So I can select the rule and I can go to actions and I can reevaluate the rule. So the expected result is since I manually deleted the flow log, the compliance status of the rule should be non-compliant. So as you can see, it is saying as one non-compliant. So you go to the rule and then it will show you which resource is non-compliant. So this is the VPC for which I deleted the flow log, VCDE. So that's the VPC shown up here. Now let me go and enable or create a flow log for it. I just want to record or log only the reject type of traffic, and I can choose what should be the CloudWatch log to which the flow log has to be deposited. I can also choose what should be the IAM role for the flow log. So a role for the flow log. Let me choose that. I think it is this one. Okay. Okay, so the flow log has been created. So I have created a flow log to record or to log the reject traffic, and it gets the destination for the flow log is this log CloudWatch log group, and these are the other details. Now I go to config again and I evaluate the rule. Reevaluate. So I need to wait for a few seconds. So you can see the status has changed from non-compliant to compliant, and there are no non-compliant resources. So the VPC for which I enable the flow log, it is compliant, right? So this is how it helps you to constantly have an insight into the changes that the various AWS resources undergo. So it greatly minimizes the manual intervention. Config also helps us to remediate. So whenever things deviate, so whenever resources are non-compliant, we can also trigger certain actions which could take place in order to make it compliant, or any workflow that we want to trigger. For example, I'm taking the same rule which is concerning the flow logs. So I have manually deleted the flow log, and that made the rule non-compliant. Now let's see how you can remediate it. So you select the rule and then you go to manage remediation. There are two ways in which the remediation can happen. Either you can choose it to be a manual remediation, or you can choose it to be an automated remediation. And in either case, there is something called a remediation action, which is already available as a systems manager automation in AWS. So by default, there are certain predefined remediation action. Now our rule deals with VPC flow log, right? So anytime it is non-compliant, it means that the remediation should be to enable the VPC flow log. So there is a action already available called AWS enable VPC flow log. So you select that, and you can also select other parameters like the percentage of resources against SSM documents, like for how much should be the concurrent execution rate. I would say you can just leave it to the default value. And obviously, you need to pass certain parameters. So when a particular VPC flow log has to be enabled, you would obviously need the VPC ID. So you can have the VPC ID as the parameter, and then you can also set up the other optional parameters here. So I'm just going ahead only with the required parameters. So the log destination ARN is a required parameter. So I need to give the log group to which I want the flow log to be collected. So I'm pasting the ARN here, and then I save change. Okay, so one or more is invalid. Okay, so I also need to give the automation assume role. So let me go to my IAM. Because the remediation is stored, I mean, they are nothing but an automation document in SSM. So you need to have an IAM role already created, which has the necessary privilege in the SSM. So this is my SSM role. Let me also show you the policies. So it just has the SSM automation role associated to it, and this is the trust relationship. So I just need to give the ARN of this role. Yeah. So I copy the ARN here. And then I click Save Change. So every time this rule is becoming non-compliant, automatically it will be enabled by AWS. So I just go to a select rule, and then I click reevaluate. And after a few seconds, it would become compliant. So that's how remediation can be handled. The next use case that we are going to see in config is how do we bring in CloudWatch. So there is a lot of scope for Lambda and CloudWatch to be integrated with config. So whatever we saw now was the default features that we get with AWS, but we can greatly enhance the value that we get out of config by bringing in automation. With something which we try to do with every AWS service. In CloudWatch, there is something called rules, and rules is nothing but the series of events which gets triggered, right? So I have a rule which tracks the changes which are made in the CloudTrail configuration. So let me show you how we can integrate config with a CloudWatch rule. So you can go and create a rule. So when you create a rule, you select the event source. So for us, the event source will be config. So you select config here. And then you can select what should be the event type. So anytime there is a change in the config rule compliance change. So which means anytime there is a change in the compliance status of a config rule, I can decide what should happen. So in the earlier case, we saw remediation, and remediation decides what should happen when a rule becomes non-compliant. Now in here, there is another option in which I can tie it up with a CloudWatch. CloudWatch to the CloudWatch rule. So every time the CloudWatch, the config rule compliance changes, I can configure the series of action that needs to take place. So I can select compliance change notification, and we can also select which specific rule. So for example, I can select any of these rules here. So I'm going to create a managed rule for tracking the CloudTrail. So this rule is to check whether CloudTrail is enabled, a CloudTrail is enabled in an account or not. So this is the one. So I can put in the rule here and add it. So which basically means that every time the status of the CloudTrail enabled rule in config changes, I could decide the series of action that takes place, for which I can use Lambda. So I'm going to add Lambda as a target. I already have a Lambda function created, and I add it as a target. So every time the status of the CloudTrail enabled rule changes in the config, the Lambda function will get triggered. So I go and configure details. So let me show you the Lambda function. So this is the Lambda function which gets triggered. I'll just walk you through the Lambda function. So what it basically does is, first it will check whether the CloudWatch, the CloudTrail is enabled or not. And then it will update certain configuration details of the CloudTrail. So I'll tell you why this has been set up. So enabling the CloudTrail is fine. But if you see in every AWS organization, we typically centralize all the logs. So enabling the CloudTrail is not enough. The CloudWatch associated CloudWatch log group should also be set to the right one. So every organization will have a particular log group in which all the logs should be collected. So this Lambda function through Boto 3 SDK, it programmatically checks whether the right CloudWatch log group ARN has been set up or not. And if it is not set up, it will update the CloudWatch log group to the correct one. So there are certain parameters which are set up as the environment variables. So you can see here the S3 bucket. So this is the centralized S3 bucket. So this is the destination CloudTrail CloudWatch log in which all the CloudTrails from all of the AWS accounts should be collected. There is also a SNS topic associated with it, and this is the CloudTrail name. So this is how you can bring in a Lambda function. You can also use a CloudWatch rule and monitor and also decide what kind of actions have to take place in addition to the rules that config offers. Config also helps to query the resource inventory. So you can see something called advanced queries here. So you can, there are some queries already available by AWS. So you can just check them out. We can also write our own queries. So they are nothing but how do we, like once the AWS account grows and you have an AWS organization that in which there are a number of AWS member accounts, shared services accounts. So we would need a situation where we would need to write our own custom queries. So these queries are they are SQL queries at the end of the day. So I have some simple queries already written. So, for example, if I want to know all of the EC2 instances, and I can run the query, and it will return the results. Now, there are certain parameters which are predefined, and you can the all of these parameters are available in the AWS documentation. So you can just say AWS config resource types. So this will give you a list of all the resource types, and so for example, if you want to know what are the various Athena data catalogs which are available, so you can select them, and then you can put it here, use it here in your SQL query, and you can run the query, and you will get the result. So that's how you can use the query editor of config. Now let me move on to, there is something called aggregator. So aggregators, they become handy when we have multiple accounts. So every project has AWS organization, and every organization has a minimum of 50 to 100 member accounts. And config is an account level service. So every account will have its own config, and it's not practically possible to go and check in each and every account. So that's where aggregator comes handy. So using aggregator, you can decide what are the various accounts for which you want config data, the findings, or if you want to do for the entire organization, you have that option as well. You can also select what regions you want the aggregator to function upon. So you can y- you can also decide if you don't want all of the regions, you just have 2 3 regions that you want to go ahead with, you can create an aggregate. The next module that we are going to see is Conformance Pack. Conformance Pack is a collection of rules. So whenever you have multiple accounts, and each account, though as per best practice, they are supposed to follow and enable and evaluate certain managed rules, it becomes impractical to have every account owner follow that. So if we can package all of the rules along with the remediation, it would help us to standardize things. So that's where Conformance Pack becomes handy. So it's a collection of config rules and remediation actions, which you can deploy as a single package or as a single entity in an account and a region, or it can also be applied across an organization. So if you look at it, you will have, I mean, this is how the screen for Conformance Pack looks. And there are again default Conformance Packs already available with AWS. So these are the pre-packaged Conformance Pack. They are available as files, as individual templates, and you can download them from Git. So you just say Git AWS Conformance Pack. So each Conformance Pack is available as a YAML file. So when it becomes handy is you can download these YAML files and you can add your own customizations. So for example, if I want to use the S3 with remediation Conformance Pack, I might have certain project level S3 bucket policies or S3 permissions which I want to be customized. So I can download these YAML files and add my own customizations and save it as another YAML file and upload the YAML file as a template here and deploy it. So that's one use of having Conformance Pack. I can also use the predefined Conformance Packs. So for example, if my organization has to abide by CIS, so I can just say CIS AWS and then click on next. So it will deploy the Conformance Pack for CIS benchmark. So you can see here in few minutes it will evaluate the score against this Conformance Pack. So what it basically means is, I mean, once it evaluates, we will be able to see the individual rules and the remediations. So all of the managed rules behind the CIS benchmark will be available in config. So you will be able to go on to the rules. So you can see here, earlier we had just 2 rules. Now you can see all of the rules which are available as a package for CIS benchmark. For example, you raising an alarm when KM is disabled, or CloudTrail encryption is not enabled. Access keys are whether they are rotated or not. So all of these rules have been added, as you can see here. So you don't have to worry about complying with CIS benchmark anymore. You just need to deploy these in this. This is the Git link which has all of these Conformance Packs. So you will know, and certain Conformance Packs are also updated every month. New packs are added. So you can keep checking the Git for the updates. Okay, so that was the small demo that I wanted to do on config. So we have covered most of the key features of config, and this is an evolving service from AWS, and it's undergoing a lot of updates, and there are quite interesting roadmap as well available. AWS plans to add many more conformance packs and rules. I encourage you to use to greatly help in security automation and compliance for your projects.
Okay, so that was a comprehensive demo on the AWS config. So I've seen on the demo that you have configured the config rules. So what are the minimum config rules you recommend an AWS account should have?
See, at a bare minimum, I would say the S3 buckets not being public. So there is a rule which will throw an alert even if one of the S3 bucket is left for public access. So that rule should definitely be there. And a very useful rule, another one is on the cloud formation stack. So cloud formation stack drift detection rule. So I would recommend that. Then EC2 instances not having public IP address. Same way, EBS snapshots. You should never have EBS snapshots exposed to public traffic. And the root user, the root user should not have access keys. That is strictly no. And CloudTrail should always be enabled, so that rule should also be available. And EBS volumes should be encrypted by default. Then S3 should be encrypted by default. Then the VPC default security group should be closed. So every VPC will have every account has a default VPC, and that has a security group which has the same kind of configuration. So it is well known to everyone, and that security group should be closed for use. And ensure the ACM certificates are not expiring. So there is a managed tool for that. You should use that. And IAM user access keys should be rotated. And also, if there are any inactive accounts, see to it that they are always disabled. So I think these should be the bare minimum config rules that one should use.
Okay, okay, that's great. And I've seen that we can configure the custom config rules, right? So what are
Yes.
the, could you just give me some examples of the custom config rule that any organization could create?
Yeah, see, custom config rules, as I showed you, there are lambdas. So that lambda can be used to create a custom config rule, and we should greatly leverage its capability. So the typical use case that we see is every organization will have external tools. Typically, you find security tools like Qualys and Trend Micro. Qualys agents are installed in the EC2 instances. So all of these security tools expose a lot of APIs, which will give you a great insight into the security posture. Now, creating Lambda functions which calls these APIs, and we can decide based on the criteria under which these Lambda functions should return a status of compliant or non-compliant. And that way we can integrate these external tools, and we can have a single dashboard of the security posture, not just for within the boundary of AWS, but also with these external tools as well. So it helps you to have a single pane of window to see the security posture.
Okay. So the last question would be, how can anyone get started in cloud security?
Okay. So for someone to start in cloud security, first of all, I would say you should have the interest towards cyber security. And when you delve into any cloud, for instance, if when you are learning AWS, you will be exposed to config, to firewalls. So if you have interest towards troubleshooting, if you have interest towards building things, that's when your interest in cloud security will also get started.
Thank you for the session, and I hope this is helpful to the audience.
Thank you, Saran, for having me here. And I see that you are doing a great job. I see a variety of videos on AWS, in DevOps, in Lambdas, and this is, I think, it's one of your first video on security. I wish you all the best, and I hope you continue uploading a lot of great videos on AWS Cloud. Thank you so much for having me again.